Close your eyes, picture where you'll be in a year, now open them and do what it takes to get yourself to what you just pictured. That was an exercise my high school counselor would do with us in the fall of our senior years to get us prepared for our college applications process. But for me, it turned out to be the biggest lie I'd ever told myself. When I did that exercise, I pictured the same thing all my friends did. Myself on the campus of a large state school with football, Greek life, and tens of thousands of students. I told myself this is what I wanted because it was what I was expected to want by the culture of my town. In Arnold, Maryland, there are generally 4 paths for 95% of the students. Not attending college, going to the community college, going to a small Maryland school, or attending a large state school, usually somewhere on the East Coast. This is where I pictured myself, but where I found myself by the next fall was in the elusive 5%. The 5% who find themselves explaining where they are going, where it is, and why on earth they would do that. I found myself at home after all my friends had gone. I found myself in my first transatlantic flight. I found myself in a foreign country with no idea what to expect. But most importantly, I found myself just as happy as I expected to be, but doing something I never thought I would be. I found myself as a student in the NUN Greece program. By straying from the path of my friends, I put myself in a position to experience more new things than I had in 4 years of high school combined. Throughout high school, I'd gotten used to the grind. The day after day, year after year grind of schoolwork, sports, friends, and commitments. In Greece, there was no grind. Every day, I could wake up and know there was a good chance I would see something I'd never seen before. I could decide on a Thursday that this weekend I would take a bus to Istanbul or a plane to Paris. At home, it could have taken me at least half an hour in a car to not know where I was. But in Greece, all it would take is a 5-minute walk out of the hotel, and I loved it. As a part of the NUN program, I had to participate in weekly service learning activity within the community. I had done service before on a large scale, spending a week with 15 classmates with Habitat for Humanity in Oklahoma. I expected this to be a similar experience, but I couldn't have been more wrong. In Oklahoma, I found myself in a fast-paced, tiring environment with friends I'd known for years, without much interaction with anyone else. Here I found myself with 3 other people I'd known for just a week, working in a soup kitchen with only one other person who spoke English. I was assigned to work at the Anna Lipsey Church soup kitchen, so logically I figured I'd be doing something related to food or serving people. I wasn't close there either. Our site didn't begin serving food until 2 hours after we left, and the kitchen was too small to fit 4 extra people in to prepare the food, so we usually spent the time cleaning. While we didn't get to directly help people in need, I knew that by doing the jobs we were given, it allowed the other women in the kitchen to focus more on those in need. Vasiliki was the one woman who spoke English there, so she was tasked with keeping us busy, and she may be the nicest woman I've ever met. We were warned ahead of time that the people at the kitchens wouldn't always be used to the idea of foreigners coming in to help, and they would think that they should be serving us and making sure we're comfortable. Vasiliki would always offer us coffee and snacks before she would let us begin working, but this wasn't how she stood out to me. She was full of experiences to share, advice to give, and compliments to lend. By the time I was done with my shift, I'd have heard at least 3 stories, 2 life tips, and been assured I had the prettiest eyes she'd ever seen. My experience in the kitchen is something I will always cherish. While living in Greece, we were enrolled at the American College of Thessaloniki, or ACT, where Greek was my hardest class. Languages had never been my strength in high school, and learning a new language with an entirely new alphabet seemed like an insurmountable task. However, after long hours of studying and taking advantage of my professor's office hours before tests, I made it through the class. All of my professors at ACT were incredibly kind, knowledgeable, and looked for ways to help us succeed. My favorite class and professor was Professor Pedro for Politics of the European Union. As a political science major, I was worried that I wouldn't like the class and it would mean I'd chosen the wrong major. Luckily, my fears proved to be pointless. Being able to learn about European politics from inside the European Union, I feel gave me an advantage in understanding the beliefs behind what I could read on paper. Professor Pedro was able to tell us firsthand how people reacted when Greece joined the European Union, or what it is like to have your national currency change to something entirely different during your lifetime. If I had taken the same class back home in the United States, I would have missed out on all of these connections. What use would it be to know every detail and treaty regarding the EU and not know why people felt it was necessary or how people are dealing with the effects of it today? NUN gave me the unique chance to experience these things not as a foreigner, but as a local. My favorite part of my experience in Europe was the travel. Prior to this trip, I'd been all over the East Coast, but much of it felt the same to me. Out of the window, of course, it looked different, but people mostly looked, spoke, and lived the same way. In Europe, I could fly on a plane for 1 hour and get off surrounded by a different language, architecture, history, and culture. While living in Greece, I was lucky enough to travel to Athens, Delphi, Halkidiki, Mount Olympus, Rome, London, and Sweden. I ditched the idea of needing to see as much as I could, knowing I was still young and would probably be back, and decided to just see what I wanted at my own pace. In Rome, I spent one day just getting lost in the streets, with no schedule or map, and I fell in love with the city. At home, I was always very schedule-oriented, stressed to get on to the next thing on time. So when my friends said they wanted to explore Rome this way, I was apprehensive. I knew it was a very old city with a lot to see, but having seen it this way, I feel like I got a lot more out of it than I would have otherwise. It goes back to my outlook on politics. Why do it if you don't know what it means? 50 years from now, will I remember seeing the very old pot in the museum, or will I remember exploring the streets of Rome, meeting the locals, and trying new things? After that day, I decided to take this attitude with me everywhere I go for the rest of my life. All in all, this trip has been a revelation of my life. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything about my journey, all the way from choosing a different path than what I had pictured when I closed my eyes a year ago, to a single choice I've made here. Every choice I've made has led to an experience, and every experience is a part of who I am today.